Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Unfiltered and Unbound. I'm your host, Kate. If you're over 50, you've probably spent a good chunk of your life taking care of others, kids, partners, parents, or your career. But today we're talking about a type of self-care that doesn't involve a Pilates reformer or a treadmill. Today we're talking about social connection and how that might look different after 50. Today's podcast format is in a Q&A style format, and it's with co-host Karen. Hi, Karen. Welcome back to the podcast.
Good morning, Kate. How's your morning been today?
Absolutely fabulous. See, I can't speak. It's Sunday. All right. Today we're talking about social connection and how that might change after the age of 50. So it's a bit of a Q&A format discussion. And we'll kick off, or I'll kick off with the first question around the inner circle check. So if you look at your phone's recent calls or your top messenger chats, how many of those people were in your life 10 years ago?
Well, I was actually looking at that and going, okay, so how long is 10 years ago? When was 10 years ago? So we'll just go 2015. So I have a few people that were in my phone, and that I was regularly talking to a decade ago. I've actually got one friend that I have been friends with since I was 19.
Wow, that's
19,
awesome.
I'll just say. But I'll say with that friend, go through different parts, phases of our individual lives. We've either been, seeing each other on a really regular basis or, catching up 3 or 4 times a year, or sometimes even going a whole year. But, when you pick up the phone to that friend, it's like we just saw each other last week. And
Yep.
the other thing with a number of the friends that, it's like elastic, that friend particularly, if we're having some challenge times or, need some help or, don't have time for each other, we're not offended, but we're always there for each other.
Yeah.
So, for example, she was sick. Oh, no, I teed up time to catch up with her. And she was sick. And I said, oh, well, if you need anything, if you need a hand, let me know. And that's cool that you're not well enough to see me. We'll just figure out another time. And then later in the day, she sent me a message saying, actually, I do need help. And I need you to go to my pharmacy and I need you to get some stuff, And so that was perfectly okay. And they're, those long-term friendships that you don't have to see each other every week, but you know that they're a reliable person that will, when you phone and you say, I need some help, they'll be there. Me and you, I think as people, will always be for those long-term friends. So we've got that
Friendships, yeah.
long-term relationship, right? And it doesn't mean you have to be with that person in your back pocket all the time. And they're the really nice friendships, right? They're the ones that you can have that coffee with, every 3 or 4 months or not for a year. They've been on your life journeys with you. So I probably have maybe 2 or 3 people like that. Like we're not there each week. I've got a couple of friends that, we do see each other regularly, Kate.
Yeah. I think it's those long-term friends, it's that shared history that you've got, and
Yes.
that you can sort of leverage that. As you say, you don't need to speak to each other every day, but they're there when you need them.
Yeah. And, that I would actually kind of count my hairdresser as well if I look at my phone. I've had the same hairdresser since I was about 22 or 23. She's been through boyfriends, first marriage, children, divorce, second, life, second marriage, grandchildren, dealt with my teenage children, challenges. So again, another really comfortable relationship. And she's heading into her late 60s and I'm just like, oh man, like what am I going to do if she decides to stop being the hairdresser? And I think such is the relationship that she won't stop being a friend, right?
Yeah.
I see
Yeah.
her every 6 weeks, and we have a chit chat and we enjoy each other's company. So she's not just a hairdresser, but she's also a trusted and valued person in my life.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's you've got a bit of a mix of, you know, friends that you've had for quite some time, but also some you've accumulated or collected some newer ones post 50, which is really good. So, would you say your inner circle has grown or shrunk since you've
Uh,
turned 50?
I would say that it's probably stabilized. So I've had friends for short periods of time, depending on where I've been in my life. So
Mhm.
when I had young children, I had a group of people around me. And I'm just saying a group of people, not necessarily close friends, but a group of people, that had children my age. And then you go to school and you got school mum friends, right? Like they're not really
Mm.
friends. They're people that you interact with. But I'd say that post 50, the relationships that I have with people is much richer and much deeper, right? So they're not necessarily tied to the family, and some of them
Mm.
are tied to work, or they're tied to something. But after that association, that initial association is broken, there's still that long term kind of catching up with each other, appreciating and valuing. So I think the relationships are much, much richer, much better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And as a bit of a transition or segue, you did hit on a point about work friends there, which is going to bring me to my next question. This is sort of very relevant given recent events, I think, and that's the work friend transition. So for those of us that are in corporate, or we're still working full time, so much of our social life was actually tied to the office or is tied
Mm.
to the office. Have you found it difficult to maintain those workmate connections once a project or a job ended?
So I was at my last job for 8 years. And initially, when I joined that organization, people were quite, outside of work getting together. And I was like, yeah, you guys are a bunch of weirdos. Because prior to that, I'd been in project delivery. It's short, it's temporary organisation, come together, deliver something, move on kind of thing.
Yeah,
So a lot of the relationship is
like
around
transactional
that
type of things.
professional, yeah, it's professional. So
Yeah.
we caught up with someone that I worked with about 12 years ago as friends, right? There was nothing to do with the corporate side of things, but we'd probably caught up, husband and wife. My husband and I, knew this person. So we
Mhm.
caught up I'm going to say every 2 or 3 years. So there's very few, relationships take work, right? And you've got to
Yeah.
invest effort and you've got to invest time into it. But once that natural kind of connection of being in the office or being on a job together or talking together finishes, then sometimes, there's not that connection anymore. So from the job that I had for 8 years, there's a person who left 3 or 4 years ago. Still really good friends with that person, still catch up on a video chat because she
Hmm.
moved like so far away. But
Yeah.
before she moved so far away, I'd see her on probably a weekly basis. Yourself, we have activities that we do on a regular basis. So
Hmm.
there are some people, like there's some really good eggs that I've picked
Yeah.
up along the way. But once that corporate sort of thing is gone, they become more acquaintances, like they drift
Yeah.
into that outer sphere of friends. If you bump into them, at the coffee shop, you stop and you have a good yak and you find out, how they've been going and that kind of thing. But that regular interaction, you don't invest, right? And it's not an
Yeah.
important relationship. They're not in that close inner circle kind of thing. So, I've picked up a few, but the number of good relationships that you can maintain is probably about 4 or 5. So I think I'm very discerning about who those
Mm.
4 or 5 people are, right?
Yeah. And I think that it sort of depends on whether you've got interests in common as well that will help you be more regular with catch-ups and things once you have moved on from a job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that certainly drives it. So, if we were interested in riding bikes and going to the gym and goading each other into doing crazy things like triathlons,
Triathlons.
we'd have to find some other common connection.
Yeah.
One of my girlfriends who I met through sailing, and I had her sailing my boat and sold my boat, and you know we've both moved on from sailing. We still catch up on a really regular basis. We do craft together and we chat. And in fact, that is probably one girlfriend that we don't have a really strong common interest outside of where we originally started, but we still catch up on a
Yeah.
really regular basis, and we're a good emotional support.
And you've
We're
made
both,
time for each other.
yeah, and we support each other's careers, and
Mm.
hear each other, and we give each other that support. So certainly having that common interest, that common focus, that certainly makes it easier to maintain that friendship and relationship.
So I guess while we are talking about friendships, and think it's part of that reassessing and reevaluating friendships as you do get older. Quite often we find that there is that friend that is a bit of a just drains your energy,
Oh,
and
yes.
sometimes you just need to cull them and let them go.
Oh, yes. I've had quite a few of those over my,
I think we all
um,
have, but
yeah, so, for some friends, you grow out of it. You
yeah,
grow out
true.
of the friend. You grow out of so, at sailing, I had a girlfriend and we would have a great laugh. We would, maybe enjoy a few bottles of champagne. We'd do a little bit of silly stuff and we'd have a lot of fun. And we also did a lot of really good sailing together. But one day I kind of like went, well, actually, I don't want to be drinking that much alcohol, and
Mm,
so one of
mhm.
the traits of our relationship was around the alcohol. So, when I changed in terms of going, this isn't me anymore, then that relationship kind of, drifted into away from being that inner circle to being one of those acquaintances on the
Mhm.
outside. And there's other friends that, have just ceased because we've moved on, we've grown
Yeah.
in a different direction. Their life has taken a different turn, and for whatever reason, no longer, as chummy as we used to be. And sometimes there's a relief in that, and
Yeah.
sometimes there's a bit of a grief in that,
Grief.
and that grief is like, it was a good relationship and sad for, the change in the relationship and how that relationship has, not they're not that trusted confidant or that person that you're seeing on a regular
Mhm.
basis, the
It's just
person that
really
you're
run its
calling up. It's
course.
just like a season, right? So it
Yeah.
was that season has changed. And recognizing, I think it's actually really important, or it's important for me to recognize when there is that change in a relationship and when it's switching. And just because it switches to, they're no longer a part of the inner circle, that they're, drifted out to that acquaintance side, that doesn't stop it coming back into being more familiar and more inclusive. But sometimes, the thing that caused it to, drift out is not recoverable, or you're not
Yeah.
going to change back. Like, for example, the girlfriend that, we used to do a lot of champagne drinking with and other things. I don't think that we'll get back to that really close relationship because I've actually moved on and I've
Gone from
changed
that
so
those
much. Yeah.
behaviors. Yeah.
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 So, like I'm getting up and I'm going for the run. I'm really thinking about my health. I'm really, working hard at that, and drinking to that level doesn't
Mm.
actually work
Yes, I
in that
think it goes back to
lifestyle.
that whole shared interests thing, doesn't it? Those
Absolutely.
commonalities that you have there.
Mm.
I guess so, and I am sensing the theme on the interests here. So the next question was, when was the last time you made a new friend, and did it feel like dating again? But I think I'm thinking that it's around shared interests, or
Yeah.
potentially, the work environment where you would find it easier to make a new friend than, cold calling, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't even know what swipe left or right means. So, so in terms of friends, it's through that, being out in community, doing activities, being engaged with people. So work is, you're in this environment and you don't necessarily have to like your work colleagues, but you do have to get on with them.
Yeah, true.
But if you can like them and you can find that common interest, that's obviously a fabulous thing for, for getting up and going to work to start with. In places where I have found, friends, do rowing. I'm now doing rowing just once a week, but I used to do rowing several times a week. So the rowing club, that would possibly be the last time I was on a date. A friend date? Well, it wasn't actually a friend date. It was like, oh, you two are about the same height. You were born within a year of each other. You'll be in the same grade. Get into a double and off you go figure out if you can row together. And with that person, we did row for a couple of seasons together, and of course through that common, we had children, or her children are about 3-4 years younger than mine, and we had that common interest. And so, I was thinking about her today. I haven't seen her for a while ago, and hey, chop chop, let's catch up for a cup of tea. So that would be probably in the last 10 years. So it's around that common interest, and that common, like you say, if there isn't the common interest, there's not the connection, right? So
True.
that's how, not cold calling or sitting next to someone in a bus or an aeroplane to, start those conversations, and becoming friends with, those people. It's more around things that I've doing in work or sport or social or that kind of thing. Connection is so important. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I
it's
absolutely agree. I was researching it for this podcast, and there
Mhm.
is such a vast amount of studies on the subject and how lack of social connection can be detrimental to your health, particularly at those milestone stages like, in your 50s or heading towards retirement, where your identity is all wrapped up in what
Mm.
your job or your role may have been. No, it's certainly exceptionally interesting. And yeah, just the sheer volume of research and data that was out there was quite mind blowing to me. So I guess really and I think that you've alluded to it here during the conversation where we have been talking about interests, but what do you think's the biggest barrier to meeting like-minded women in your 50s?
I think it's, you need to be getting out of the
Yep.
home or the workplace and exposing yourself
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
situations where you meet people, and where you engage with community. So I've got a girlfriend who does rockabilly dancing.
Oh,
So
yeah.
she meets people through rockabilly dancing. She also plays music, so she meets people through going to music events, piano, classic piano, I'll just add. So very, proper kind
Yep.
of music. So, she's got some good friends through that music engagement. So it's going to things and places
And putting
and
yourself out
doing
there.
things, yeah, where you're going
Mm.
to engage with people in community. So that's quite important, that you can't just be sitting at home. You're not going to meet anyone at home, and you don't want to go to a pub, right? Who wants to go to a pub, right?
Been there,
Um,
done that.
yeah, no, it's just, but that was so like, so it's having those interests and finding those interest groups, and either accidentally or deliberately through looking, a lot of councils, local councils. When I was temporarily an elite athlete or unemployed, I went to the local library, and from that resource, and local libraries are wonderful places. I strongly recommend you pop down.
Okay.
But they have a newsletter, and they've got all these, these groups that meet at the local library. So, on Thursday night they have board games, night. So you can turn up and you can go and play a board game or learn how to play a board game. And they have Dungeons and Dragons for teens, and they've got all these. They have a book club. Amazing, the library that has 3 different
Yep.
book clubs. But I actually go to a book club at my yacht club. But that's really, going to a book club, you get to meet other people. You read stories that you wouldn't ordinarily pick up. In fact, I started reading novels because I joined the book club during COVID.
Yeah.
Before that, it was all, textbooks, work matters, professional development, all that boring stuff. So now I'm actually reading stories.
Reading
It's
for
great
fun.
to have, reading for fun, but also you get to have a chat about it. And if you haven't read the book, you still turn up, or I listen to the books on audio. So, there's lots of different ways to have that community connection, and they're the ways that you do get to encounter people and you have those chats. And the rowing, my rowing club, I learned so much about menopause. I learned so much about, from the ladies who are masters and above me in age and gone through it. And some of their advice was, I'm going to say, life-saving, because I was really struggling with a lot of those menopause conditions. And one of the ladies said, like, don't be an idiot. Go to your doctor, get on the drugs, sort yourself out. You don't have to put up with this. Getting into, finding where your tribe is and the people who
absolutely.
do the stuff that you like to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
So
trying new stuff.
yeah, and I think that's a really good point. But I think there's a couple of themes that are coming out here which seems to correlate quite strongly with the studies or the information that I've been sort of sifting through in the last couple of days. One is it does take effort to maintain social connection. So you do need to put yourself out there and be consistent with it. And if that's a cup of coffee, every couple of weeks, that's a much better option than organising a big dinner every 6 months or once a year. And I think shared common interests are a good building block for friendships as well. So if you're wanting to make new friends, find something that interests you, like a book club, going to the library, whether it's, swimming, cycling, running, knitting, or sewing.
Volunteering.
Or volunteering is another. And there's a great study that's come out of, I think it was Hong Kong, about volunteering. But I think that's it for today for us. So thank you very much for taking time on your very busy Sunday to sit down with me and discuss your experiences in relation to friendships after 50. And I will chat to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kate. Have an awesome Sunday. Hey!
Thank you for joining us on the podcast today. But before we go, I wanted to leave you with 2 practical exercises that you can use to build your social connection muscle. The first is the low effort reach out. So you don't need a 3-hour lunch to catch up with friends. You can send a voice note to a friend whilst you're walking the dog in the morning, perhaps. Maybe mention a shared memory. The small, frequent pings are more effective at maintaining a bond than one big dinner every 6 months. The second thing you can do is to follow your curiosity or interests. So the easiest way to make new friends at 50 plus is to stop looking for friends and start looking for interests. Now, it can be aligned to whatever hobbies or interests you might have. And in fact, if you want to take a tip from episode 1, you might decide to try something completely new and join a group or club because you want a new hobby. When you focus on the activity, the friendship happens naturally as a byproduct. So today I want you to pick up the phone and text one person, just one. Tell them you were thinking of them or ask them a specific question about their week. That's it. You're not just being nice, you're literally boosting your heart health and your brain power. Thank you for joining me today on Unfiltered and Unbound. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. It's a great excuse to start a conversation. I'm Kate, and I will see you next time.